master politician and was an outstanding statesman too. He was a great leader and our hero, you understand. That's why we remember Burnham.
Yes, morning again to you, my viewers. This is the fourth Sunday in the month of December, and we're in the festive season. This will be our last program before the end of 2018. But I should say now that I would like to thank all those persons who have been supporting the Forbes Burnham Foundation over the years. And I also would like to tell our executives that the work continues for 2019. Those of you who have been with us over the years would know that our program entails commemorating the birth and death anniversary of the founder leader of the People's National Congress Reform, Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. We have also geared ourselves over the years to make sure that we keep his dreams alive and highlight those specific achievements which have been signal achievements for the advancement of the lives of the people of this country. One of those outstanding achievements of Forbes Burnham is the local government system, which we will discuss this morning. We will also venture into the area of the no confidence motion that was just passed in the National Assembly, its relevance and what the Constitution says in relation to the no confidence motion, and the way forward in relation to addressing the welfare concerns of the Guyanese people. Like I said, those of you who have been with us know that every year we conduct a series of activities to commemorate the birth and the death anniversary of Forbes Burnham. His birth in the month of February and his death in the month of August. Those activities include church services. We normally hold a concert. We have sports inclusive of cycle races, 3-stage. We also have debates. We also have a symposium. But for next year, we would like to expand our horizon a little bit by encouraging people to join the foundation with its work. Because you know, Forbes Burnham has been an outstanding character of Guyana, and it is important that we celebrate his life continuously and those things that he was able to achieve for Guyanese and for Guyana. On this program, we have looked at Forbes Burnham and foreign policy, Forbes Burnham and independence, Forbes Burnham and women, Forbes Burnham and youth, amongst a range of topics that we have addressed on this program. But like I said, today we will be looking at Forbes Burnham and local government. With me in the studio today is the chairman of the foundation, well-known person, has been at the university for quite some time. He is now a senior functionary on the Guyana Elections Commission, Mr. Vincent Alexander. And Vincent, local government. The government has held 2 local government elections so far since they came into power in 2019.
Thank you very much, Clayton. Good morning to you, viewers. Before I respond to the local government question per se, I'd like to join with Clayton in extending season's greetings to all of you viewers who have been with us and who are with us for the Christmas season of 2018. And since we will not be having the program before the New Year, also to extend all the best for you in the New Year. I'd also like to join with Clayton in expressing our appreciation to all those persons who helped to make our work in 2018 the success it was. And I'd like to take the opportunity to make special mention, hopefully no one is forgotten, but certainly we'd like to thank the Guyana Police Force for the assistance they gave us in making our 3-stage cycle race a success. We'd like to thank the National Sports Council for making the gymnasium available and for co-sponsoring the cricket competition among the schools. I'd also like to thank the Ministry of Education for facilitating the involvement of over 40 schools in our annual softball cricket competition. In that regard, thanks also goes out specifically to Mr. Monroe of the National Sports Council, who organized and saw that competition through to a successful end. I'd like to thank also the Guyana Table Tennis Federation for once again facilitating a tournament, table tennis tournament in honor of Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. We also would like to express our appreciation to Tasty Dish, formerly Spicy Dish, for their continued assistance. Our appreciation also goes out to Austin Bookstore, who has been a constant donor of school material for those children who participate in our mentorship scheme, one of our flagship programs. With regard to our mentorship scheme, our thanks goes out to the Crew Training Center for once again this year facilitating our annual camp. And I think the Department of Youth, the Ministry of the Presidency, should also be thanked because they were the ones who made the arrangements. To all those persons who helped us with the camp, the Carnegie School of Home Economics, in particular the Ministry of Health, the people doing health education, all those persons who came along and did sessions at our camp, we are also thankful to you. We must say thanks also to the Chetwing Learning Resource Center. And for those of you who do not know what it is, that is physically located at the former residence of His Excellency the President. And we thank him and the center for facilitating our weekly sessions that are held here with our children who are our mentees. All of the persons who also came forward and did work with our mentees, we'd like to express our sincere thanks and appreciation to them. And the list goes on and on of persons. I may have missed a few, but please forgive me if I did. But we are grateful to all of those persons, all, who contributed this year to making our programs a success, and that they were, without their contributions, we would not have been able to succeed. A significant omission would have been to express our thanks to the President himself, who facilitated our first annual dinner at Buridi Burnham. That was quite a success as well. The Uber Singers, how could I forget them? The Uber Singers came on board this year, and they were major donors in kind at our annual concert. So thank you very much, Uber Singers, to Theatre Guild for continuing at a cost to facilitate our annual concert. Christian Liberal College can't go without mention. They have from time to time made their facilities available to our mentorship scheme for its induction, to the foundation itself, a symposium which we have held, and so we're also grateful to Kitchener Labour College for the assistance that they have given over the years. I think this year we also made use of St. Stanislaus College, as we have done in the past, and thanks to them as well, though we do pay some small fee. And crowned it all, we have to express our thanks to Channel 9 for continuing to facilitate this program on Channel 9 every fourth Sunday of the month. And so the Forbes Burnham Foundation expresses its thanks to all of those who made a contribution, expresses the best of wishes to the population at large in this festive season, and we look forward to a prosperous 2019 as a foundation, and a prosperous 2019 for all of you out there. Now, Clayton, you've asked me to comment on
just to address this comment on local government. That was held twice since the government,
particularly the elections.
Yeah,
I would like to preface that by saying, you know, this program is called State of the Nation.
Yeah.
And the concept of this program is to look at current events and to see the relationship between current events and the foundation which was laid by Lyndon Forbes, Sampson Burnham. To look at current events and to see how the ideas of Lyndon Forbes, Sampson Burnham are still relevant together today. And so in that regard, yes, local government is something that we should be looking at. Lyndon Forbes, Sampson Burnham paid significant attention to local government. In the first instance, he was the one who was responsible for commissioning the Marshall Report, which sought to review our pre-independence and slightly post-independence local government system. Coming out of that report, there were recommendations, and he responded to those recommendations by virtue of the legislation of 1969, I think
69.
1969.
1969.
The Local Government, the Municipal and District Councils Act. That was Burnham's response to the recommendations of the Marshall Report, and that act sought to provide for regulating municipalities and regulating district councils at that time. So we see from the very inception, the post-independence period, a focus on local government by Lyndon Forbes, Sampson Burnham, who after the 1969 legislation then went into elections and held local government elections in 1970. We had the establishment of a number of municipalities after that. He came in with with Georgetown and New Amsterdam in place, and saw the introduction of the Caribbean municipality, the Rose Hall municipality, the Linden municipality, and the Andrew Regina municipality. Those are all contributions of Lyndon Forbes, Sampson Burnham to the local government landscape. We then came to the 1980 Constitution.
That's right, a critical
The 1980 Constitution was important for local government because it became the first constitution in English-speaking Caribbean, and if I dare say in the English-speaking Commonwealth, where local government was elevated to the level of the Constitution. It no longer remained a mere administrative arrangement for decentralization. It was integrated into the Constitution and became a part of the political system, a part of the democratic system of our country. And so again, we have to give credence to Lyndon Forbes, Sampson Burnham for the 1980 Constitution and the subsequent Local Democratic Organs Act of 1980, which sought to concretize what the Constitution provided for. Now, that brings us along because when we look at the recent elections, we saw that we had elections in municipalities. Of course, there were new municipalities, David Granger regime, but the old ones were still there, the ones created under Burnham, the ones that predated independence, and the neighborhood councils. We saw also elections in the neighborhood councils, and we've had an expansive number of neighborhood councils. I think there's somewhere around 62, if I'm not mistaken, neighborhood democratic councils. But these councils were things more or less prescribed for under the Constitution and under the Local Government Democratic Organs Act, all of the making of Lyndon Forbes, Sampson Burnham. So that when one talks in Guyana about current events, one can see that we go back to that legacy of Lyndon Forbes, Sampson Burnham. I would, however, like to add to that some critique of the system and some critique of the elections. When one looks at what Burnham provided for, he provided for a 10-tier, 6-tier system of local government.
6-tier?
6-tier system.
Okay.
The People's Cooperative Units, neighborhood councils, community councils, district councils, sub-regional councils, and regional councils. That's what Burnham provided for in the local government, Local Democratic Organs Act. We have only been emphasizing 3 of those tiers. The neighborhood, which has become
the NDC,
the most prolific set of councils across the country, the regions, 10 which we've had since 1980, and the municipalities. Those are the ones that we've emphasized. And we've seen that emphasizing those and neglecting to emphasize another one which was provided for is problematic. In the subsequent reform of the Constitution, there's provision for village councils, but not as mandatory, village councils at the behest of the population of the villages. So there is some approximation to what would have been the people's cooperative units that was provided for under the Burnham system. And why do I mention that? I mention that because in the absence of village councils, what we have seen is neighborhood councils where those councils have taken responsibility for things that are unique to the villages. And I can be very specific here. One would think that issues such as recreation and cultural activities are village activities because the villages are not homogeneous. You know, the villages have different population compositions and peculiarities that are specific to the village in that regard, even in terms of the economic activities. And so, in the absence of village councils, you have a situation where neighborhood councils can make decisions that impact specifically villages, not the entire neighborhood, the villages. And the people of the village are themselves not allowed to make those decisions for things that affect only them. And more particularly when one comes to the issue of land. We know that historically our local government system, apart from Georgetown and New Amsterdam, which predated independence and predated even the emancipation of the enslaved, the system grew up on villages and village councils, which were natural villages where the people themselves came together and established in the first instance management committees. Those voluntary bodies were later seeded into state bodies that we now call local government or local democratic organs. But the fact of the matter is that life started in those villages, and the life started around the purchase of land by the villagers for the establishment of their villages, the purchase of land. So for all intents and purposes, though those lands became bequeathed to the state through a local government system, those lands are original private property, purchased by the villages. And so the point I want to make is that with the existence of the neighborhood councils and the absence of village councils, these lands are now under the purview of neighborhood councils. And so in fact the people who should be inheriting these lands have lost control to a body called a neighborhood council. And to me that seems to be a very unfair system. And if we had activated the people's cooperative units and bequeathed the authority for councils for the land to those units, then you'd have retained that ancestral rights of people to have control over lands which were purchased by their ancestors and which were bequeathed to the villages for use in the villages. And
Vincent, that's a very, very big topic. And I want to tell our viewers that I'm going to be opening the lines so you can call in and make your comments in relation to these remarks, because Mr. Alexander has been giving a very broad, detailed outline as to the emergence or how the local government system has evolved in Guyana. But I want to just steer us into the area where all those things that Forbes Burnham has conceptualized and actually implemented, local government in Guyana took a hiatus for a very long time.
Yes, there was a hiatus, and the hiatus really, there were two. There were two. 1970 to 1994, 1994 to 2016. There were two. What we noticed about both periods is that there was reform of some sort going on in between. During the period of the hiatus, there was reform going on. But what it did was to kind of disinherit the people of local government, in the sense that people became unacquainted with the local government system and local government as a system. And so really now you find that we've had elections in 94 and in 2016, and so people are now becoming reacquainted with local government, and most of the people under the age of 40 or even 50 really don't have a local government experience, and that is impacting what's happening in the system, because many of the people become counters themselves, what I would call rookies, completely new to local government. Many of the voters don't have a clue about local government, so there's a tremendous void in terms of our embrace of local government, a void which is partly exhibited in the turnout at the elections. And I'm not saying that's the only reason for a low turnout, but it's partly responsible for the low turnout. And it's also responsible for the performance of the councils, because very many councillors go to those councils and are themselves not quite aware, and therefore are not quite prepared for the proper administration of local authorities. So there's much work to be done. And again, here I mentioned Lyndon Forbes Sampson, because the nature of the man and the regime that he had would have ensured that a lot of public education would have been done in relation to local government. I remember when Burnham established National Development and Office of the General Secretary of the People's National Congress, which came in for a lot of flack because they said that the state had been taken over by the party. But that apart, that ministry slash Office of the General Secretary did a lot of work in terms of national education, public education, and gives us an example of what needs to be done for us to be out there in the public institutions, in the private institutions, in the communities, educating people on the local government system, so both the citizenry and the councillors are prepared for local government. But I want to emphasize the fact that we have distorted some of his intentions by not implementing all of the levels of local government, and more particularly by not implementing the village level, because what we have done is to take away from people their right to have control over what they've inherited, and particularly here I'm referring to the land, and of course attached to that are issues of culture and issues of recreation and issues of education, all of which are essentially local issues. And so that in part tells us where we ought to be going in terms of the development of the re-engineering, the renaissance of our local government system.
I want to tell our viewers that the lines will be open in 3 minutes. You can make a call. We will also be looking at the no confidence motion. You have had a long, detailed outline in terms of the evolvement of the local government system in Guyana. We have just had the second election since this government came into power in the month of November, and that in itself is a signal achievement for the current government after the hiatus for all those years. I think persons would be interested in relation to the comment you made. I think we have said on this program before, even when His Excellency was talking about local government, we were talking about the need for the government to enhance or more or less kind of promote. Like you rightly said, in those years, Burnham didn't only promote the education of people to be educated about the system, but he also tied that into our symbols of nationhood and how they ought to be respected. All those things are critical in terms of promoting the values and the importance of citizens knowing, recognizing not only what their roles and responsibilities are in the villages, but their role and responsibilities in relation to the nation at large. And in that sense, the education program was very, very effective and useful. I would like to perhaps go over to the question of the no confidence motion, which was just...
As we go over to that, let me just say to the people out there, particularly people in villages, that our constitution presently provides for the establishment of village councils, but that the establishment of those village councils should be done at the request of the citizens. And so I'm reaching out to the villagers to say, look, if you understand the problems that you're faced with, particularly in relation to land, one of the mechanisms at your disposal is for you to call for the establishment of village councils. And that will also require the government itself to put in place a mechanism, because the Constitution says that the Parliament should establish the mechanism for the establishment of these village councils. And so it is something which I think should be put on the national agenda, so that villagers can have their councils, have control over the matters that concern them.
Yes, this I was in the National Assembly when this no confidence motion was passed. And I would like our viewers to perhaps give us some, I'd like you to give us some perspective in relation to what this entails, what it's all about, what the Constitution says, because people are still curious to know exactly what would happen. In fact, on the first day when it was passed, I heard people saying that all the ministers should go home and so on and that, and these kind of things. So I'm saying, but it is not that, that's not the way it's outlined in the Constitution into how when a government falls by no confidence, what happened. So this program, I want a segment to really address this question of the no confidence motion.
Yes, Clayton, it's important that people understand where we're at.
Hmm.
Again, we're talking about a constitution, the making of which in the main is what they call the Burnham Constitution. Suffice to say that the provisions for a no confidence motion and its consequences, if I'm not mistaken, were not in the original 1980 Constitution. That came in under the reform, the 1997-2001 reform. What does that provide for? It provides for motions at large, but specifies that in the instance where there's a no confidence motion, which is carried by a majority of the Parliament.
In the National Assembly.
Which is carried by a majority in the National Assembly, quite correct, that the government should resign. The President of the government should resign, and there should be elections in 30 days. Now,
in 3 months?
In 90 days.
90 days, 90 days.
Sorry, 90 days. 3 months. However, what is not clear is that whilst the provision says that, the very next provision of the Constitution says that the government should remain in place until those elections are held and the new government is sworn in. So whilst on one hand it says that the President and government should resign, that really refers to dissolving of Parliament. Mm-hmm. And so Parliament, in fact, is dissolved. Mm-hmm. And so you don't have in Parliament any longer a government side and an opposition side. So the opposition too goes home in that regard. Mm-hmm. You don't any longer have a president as the second element of Parliament, mm-hmm, assenting to bills, because there are no bills to be assented to. Parliament is not meeting. Mm-hmm. But the government, in terms of the executive, remains in place for the conduct of the affairs of the country, mm-hmm, until such time as elections are held and a new government is sworn in.
That's interesting.
So the government is in place. Secondly, the question of when the elections are held, there is some leverage for the Parliament at its last sitting, when it's been dissolved, to in fact determine by a two-third majority a variation to that period of 3 months.
That's outlined in the Constitution.
Yes, the Constitution specifies that when the Parliament, that the Parliament can determine that rather than observe the provision of the Constitution which says within 3 months, that for good reason, with a two-third majority, that could be varied to a period, and it doesn't specify specifically how long that period should be. And so in some regards, we still have to wait on the Parliament to see what determination is made by the Parliament, whether they would simply dissolve and not pronounce on an extended period, or whether there would be an extended period. And I think, Clayton, that when you hear Jack Dio say he wants to talk to the President, I think in constitutional terms, that is the only matter I can imagine
he would
that
like
he would want
to discuss.
could speak about in constitutional terms, because that's what the Constitution provides for. They could then decide, as leaders of the two major parties in the Parliament, that there is need for more time,
some additional time for
right?
election.
And they can then have the Parliament, the National Assembly, put a motion for greater time, and in that instance, the time could be greater. So I think the population out there needs to understand that there's not yet a done deal in terms of elections in 90 days.
I want to, but the lines are now open. You're free to make your call, your comments, observations in relation to these two topics: local government, its involvement in Guyana, and we're looking currently at the no confidence motion. There is a view out there. In fact, I've heard people saying this, that the mover, this guy who voted in support of the no confidence motion from the government benches ought not to have been allowed to create the kind of disturbance that he has created as a result of this one act and then depart the state without. I mean, people have expressed these views.
Well, let's face the reality.
Matters?
What he did is there's no mechanism in the Constitution to deal with somebody preemptively, I would say, crossing the floor or crossing the floor before an act. Whilst our system is one of parties with a whip that seem to control what parliamentarians do, there is no legal provision which doesn't allow a parliamentarian to break out of the fold and to cast a vote against his or her party. But what our system does do, and this is another amendment to the 2001 amendments.
That's a new amendment?
Yes, to the 2001 amendments. It allows for, it does not allow for crossing the floor. Okay. In the sense that if you do an act of crossing the floor, then your party can immediately after that act recall you. And so I think that is what will happen, or could happen in the case of Charan Das. Either he is recalled or he resigns. In either instance, having, for all intents and purposes, crossed the floor, he will no longer be a parliamentarian once his party so determines, because there's recall legislation that provides for parties to recall someone who's crossed the floor. Now, again, we look back to the Burnham era, and in the Burnham era, crossing the floor was something that was permissible. And we've had a number of instances where a number of people from the PPP in the Burnham era did cross the floor, and I think even from the TUF people across the floor. Burnham was able to attract a lot of people out of the ranks of the other parties across the floor. And the name Ambrose, for example, rings a bell is one of the persons who crossed the floor. I think Durant is another person who crossed the floor in the earlier days, even before the 1980s.
Let's see if we take our first call. Morning, you're on there. Oh, I missed that one.
Right, so that again we see a movement away from what was provided for in the Burnham era to a situation now where one cannot, in fact, cross the floor. And if one crosses the floor by an act like a vote, then what happens is that your party can then recall you from Parliament. This incident in Parliament is very instructive and very interesting.
Before you go, morning, you're on here.
Yes, good morning to you.
Speak out a little louder, please.
Good morning to you, Mr. Alexander.
Good morning.
It's sad that this Parliament had to be ended like this, because I think that they should have gotten constitutional reform going, right? Whereby, and particularly a change in the constitution should be made whereby parties should be able to go and vote, campaign and face elections separately, and at the end of the day, right, when the elections are over, they should have been able to coalesce. Because under the system whereby you have to coalesce before elections, I think that system is very flawed, and they need to change that system. But I know they can't change it now. They had time and they didn't do it, and I think this is bad.
All right, thanks for calling.
All right, I would say there are pros and cons to the question of whether you coalesce before or after. But I don't think that would have necessarily made a difference in terms of what emerged, because whether you coalesce before or after, somebody could still, not toe the line, not toe the party line. This thing of coalition government it's not something peculiar to Guyana. What seems to be slightly peculiar is that you can't coalesce after. You have to do it before. And indeed, we don't know what would have come out of constitutional reform, but certainly that seemed to be one of the issues that people wanted to be addressed.
Not only that, currently they have people calling. In fact, I was engaged with two guys yesterday and a big lady in the 60s who was very active in the 60s, and she was saying what is necessary. They had promised constitutional reform, and that should be on the front burner. Now that these things have happened, I don't know how responsible. Let me take
it is.
Morning on here.
Hey, good morning.
Morning.
Morning to you, gentlemen. I just want to tell you all something.
Yes.
I happen to be 60 years. I know how politics work, and there is one of the most remarkable political chess moves Mr. Prasad made. I want to take somebody a bet that in a few months he would form his own party. He already won the nation choice, and sooner or later he would be forming his own party, and then when he gets the support of the people, he eventually would hand it over back as the AFC people. I commend that man. That is one of the most remarkable chess moves.
I heard you.
Huh?
No, I said I heard you.
Yes. I'm 60. I know how politics work. You see, politics is the science of who gets what, how, and when. Moses Nagamutu already get what, how, and when. Now this man, he already make his move. So all that he would be doing now is to get what and when. I'll have a nice day.
All right, thanks you. I don't think it's that simple.
The man has made his move, but I think he's made more than one move. It is in the public domain that not only did he cast the vote, but he immediately left the country, so that he's not in Guyana. He himself is on record as saying, and I can't see whether his word, what is the worth of his word, that this is probably the end of his political career. So we don't know. We're speculating. And we're still to see what happens hereafter.
Morning, Yoni. I missed that one. Yes. Yeah.
Right. So that what he did, as I said, in law,
provides for it.
Can be faulted.
Mm-hmm.
But whether in terms of ethics
that's
morality, it can be faulted, another question. And here's where one has to look at our political system. We don't have an effective constituency system.
Morning, you're on here. Morning. Morning.
You have to speak up loud.
Hello? Hello? Morning.
Yes, we don't have an effective constituency system. And by and large, people still vote for a party. Mr. Charandas, in talking about his vote of conscience, said he was representing his people. How do we identify a parliamentarian in this country as representing his or her people?
Oh yeah, true.
Outside of a constituency system. And one can look at the math in terms of the election results to get an idea of whether in fact a particular constituency belongs to a particular party and or parliamentarian. So in that context, people really vote for party and not for a particular MP. And that
morning, you're on the air. Morning. Morning. Hello? 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 Hello?
Good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Please turn on your volume.
I called to say about Mr. Charandas.
Yeah.
He, as a man, was speaking about the wrongdoings of the coalition government. But in respect to what he said, I found some sort of racist within him, because he's talking about the sugar industry that this government destroyed, the livelihoods of sugar workers. And when I check it out, he himself would not run a business that is running at a loss and keep investing his money into it. So I don't cite this move as no just move on all these things that last Charles was speaking about. It's a racist move, Mr. Jack. You say it's patriotic. Thank you.
All right, thanks for calling. Thanks.
Yeah, so I was raising the question as to whether parliamentarians have a moral right to go outside of the collective agreement of the party, given the nature of our electoral system, a system which does not necessarily identify a parliamentarian. And let's go back to this question of coalescing. If you coalesce after an election, you can hardly get more seats and more representation in the government than the number of, proportionate to the number of votes you got.
Yes.
So if one were to look at the Ghana situation and one was to look at, let's take the 2011 elections and what the AFC got in terms of votes, and assume that their contribution in 2015 was the same, the number of seats they got are disproportionate in their favor in the coalition.
In the current coalition.
In the current coalition. So that's one of the issues about coalescing after that one becomes very, very critical, as opposed to one becomes critical in the coalescing before, as opposed to coalescing after, when you can only bargain on your actual known strength.
Yes, that's true. Morning, you're on the air.
Hello, good morning.
Morning.
A call concerning the no confidence motion.
Yes.
I was watching it over the television.
Yes, go ahead.
I think Mr. Charandas.
Charandas.
Yes, yes. He probably, he said he voted confidence, right? So, just everybody, I think he make a right choice. Some people might say wrong choice. But also, I was listening to Mr. Harmon, the Minister of State. Right? He argue in Parliament. They argue well, and automatically he talk about the marriage of the former president. You think that's right for leaders of the country? You answer me that.
For leader of the country to what?
Yes, the leader of this country.
Marriage.
So he could talk about the marriage of Barjagio. They are not included in the no confidence motion. No,
he made a reference. I was there. He has referred to that incident where, in his view, of course, it is that the past president has fooled the nation for a long period of time.
Yes, yes.
That is the reference he made. Whether ethically it was the right thing to do in Parliament or not, I am not at liberty to really make pronouncement on that. But then, in your view, you're saying that you don't think that it was the right thing to do at the level of Parliament. Well, they have different views on matters of that sort.
Yes, that's correct.
The fact of the matter is this,
Okay,
and I think it was said by some people before the no confidence. It's a numbers game. The law doesn't forbid it. Issue of morality is buried, and it becomes simply a numbers game. Because, you know, like I make the point, here is one parliamentarian who in a sense is able to determine the future of the country, breaking away from a collective when his local standard cannot be disassociated from the collective.
Well, that's precisely what the guy was saying. Why I said to you, he has committed this act and then disappear, and then leave the whole, his collective as well as the country at large in a state of uncertainty. Morning, you're on the air. Turn on your volume, please.
Mr. Charandas.
Yes.
They are talking about what the Prime Minister said against the ex-president, which is Mr. Jack Hill. I overheard Mr. Charandas even mentioning about the fact that Ms. Walda Lawrence said what she said, which was not professional to me. In a coalition government. Maybe if it was not a coalition government. But what I'm saying, does he not remember when Mr. Jack Joe mentioned that the PPP party is a coal party, and there's Africans in that same party, and they wanted to know how they felt about what he had said, you know? So when I look at Mr. Charandas, what he did, how could he justify himself in the sense that he did that against his own party that he was within, and what justice would he get by giving the opposition an option like that? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I follow.
So I can't see. I believe he was a snitch from the beginning. He was sent there, as far as I'm concerned.
All right. Thanks for your contribution.
Mr. Charandas claimed that he voted with conscience. And that it had nothing to do with the PPP. But the fact of the matter is that what he did gave support to a motion of the PPP. And it went beyond merely conscience. The impact is far greater than his conscience.
But I'm asking, is that a conscience vote?
Well, it's a conscience vote formally insofar as you're free to vote how you want to. That's what conscience means. You're free, you're not under the whip. But this is a case where, as I understood it, they were under the whip.
Yes.
Right? And that's why the parties expelled him, because he defied the collective of which he's a part, and his own existence cannot be unrelated to the collective because we don't have a constituency system.
That's right. Morning, you're on here. Hello.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Yeah, if we look at the American House or the Senate, right, you have both Republican and you have Democrats.
That's right.
A Republican could go against his Republicans and vote for a Democratic bill. Why in Guyana, we holding on to this thing that the party, you gotta stick to the party.
It's
if
two different
there's a
systems.
bill that governs progress or whatever, why can't a parliamentarian vote for or against that bill on an individual basis? It's happening all over the world. In England, in the House of Commons, and a member could divert and vote against his own party. Why in Guyana we holding on to this party line? The constitution has to change.
I'm allowing Mr. Alexander to answer your question.
Well,
We have to move
probably
forward.
the constitution has to change, but the reality is that the political parties in Guyana have not facilitated a constituency system where a parliamentarian gets his mandate from his
The people
constituents.
in his constituency.
The parliamentarians here are elected at the behest of the party. People still vote for the party. So the parliamentarian here, though I might agree in a democratic system that one should have a situation where parliamentarians can vote conscience, but when you look at the structural arrangement of our parliamentarians are riding at the back of the party. They're not riding in the back of a relationship that they have with a constituency. And so, yes, in the interest of democracy, we may wish to remove from that system. In fact, in the constitutional reform process, we advocated for the introduction of
Constituency
constituencies.
system.
We had an early election in 2001 because the court said we should have such an election. It was agreed that we should go back to constitutional reform process, and one of the major things we were to look at is the establishment of constituencies. The political parties have not had the will to establish those constituencies. They prefer to stay with the system that we're with. And so I'm saying that whilst one may argue in a democracy for a relationship between the parliamentarian, the assemblyman, and the constituency and his constituents, in our country, no parliamentarian can come and tell you that that is my constituency and so many people voted for me and put me in parliament. In England, they can do that. In America, they can do that.
That's right.
And therefore, they have a moral basis on which they can say, look, I am responding to the views of my constituents, the views of my constituency. Here, they can't morally say that.
Morning, you're on here. Hello? Hello? I missed that one. Yeah, go ahead.
So
Yes.
here they can't morally say that. So I'm saying that yes, legally this could happen, but if one looks at the ethical and the moral of the situation, one may well question how can an individual who got in on the back of a party then decide to go against the party. And the question of options, conscience. If you have a conscionable problem, leave the party.
Correct.
If you have a conscionable problem,
Morning, you're on here.
resign from the party.
Hello? Morning. Hello?
Hello, good morning.
Morning, sir.
Morning.
Good morning, Alexander.
Morning,
Yes.
morning.
I have my aunt here who was been a little worried because she's been getting some calls from her friends stating that the $1,000 old age pension that they were given from the 1st of January would be taken back because of there's no confidence motion in passment.
That's not true.
That the appropriation bill has been passed.
There's no truth in that
Appropriation
statement
bill
that
was
someone
passed.
told her.
So I don't think there's any truth in that. It would be the most ridiculous thing to happen because the
Okay, sir,
opposition,
thank you very much.
the opposition was critical of it being only $1,000. So I don't see how they could now go and take back the 1,000,
Exactly.
right?
All right.
So I'm saying that the behavior of one individual impacts the life of the country.
That's the question.
Impacts the life of the country when in fact that individual does not have the basis upon which, the moral basis upon which to impact the life of the country that way. And so that points to a
Could not be challenged
flaw
in
in the
court?
system. No, I don't think it's not a legal.
It's not a legal
I think
matter.
it's a moral.
Moral issue. Okay.
So either we go for our constituencies and be very clear about what a relationship exists, and there are provisions in our constitution which suggest we should go for constituencies, because in our constitution they speak about accountability of the parliamentarian to the people
Yes.
right? But we have not gone on to put in place the laws to make that really what we're doing. So it is the party.
Morning, you're here.
Morning. That's all.
Please turn it down, sir.
Yeah, hold on 1 minute.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Yeah, morning, sir.
Morning.
You think it's right, Miss Valerie, did the right word to use?
Let me hear you.
You think it's the right word, Miss Valerie, use as a minister?
I don't think Valerie Lawrence thought with the right words herself. She apologized.
Okay, it's not the PNC alone. Vote for them. It's the whole country.
Yeah, I agree with you.
The people make the choice. When she upset that simple one upset the whole system.
But the word she used upset the system?
Yeah.
She used the wrong word. She herself has admitted that, and she has apologized for that.
She got the PNC, only they could get a job, and they could. So she should think before she speaks at a person like that.
In your view, you feel, as a minister, she ought not to have made statements like the one she made, right?
Yeah.
And she herself accepted that she was wrong, and she apologized. So there's a national consensus on
She
the
got the
matter.
confusion, man.
Yeah, all right.
Or she make the no confidence?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. All right.
She got it.
I see. All right.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thanks for calling. Different views all the time. Yes, Vincent, I heard this one. That's the reason why I asked whether legally it could have been challenged, because persons have been saying, look, this man has acted outside of those same system and principles that guided his entrance into the National Assembly, and to do something like that ought to have been, there ought to have been some basis for it to be challenged.
There's no basis in law as far as I'm aware. I mean, people can go and challenge anything. The court will then say, well, there's no basis for the challenge. But as I see it, there's no basis. But I do think there are moral and ethical problems. And that, in fact, our politics is full of moral and ethical problems. And lots of people interpret our politics to be politics. And so they accept
Morning on here.
these acts.
Morning. Please turn on your set a little bit. I just have 2 minutes more to go before we close, so please be.
Good morning.
Yes.
Morning.
I'm just calling to share my view, right?
Yes, sir.
The move that Mr. Charandas made, I don't think that put it out of conscience, because somewhere along the line, I mean, I don't have no direct evidence, but somewhere along the line, I believe that someone spooked him, and that was pre-planned. Because the fact of the matter that a few hours after he disappeared from the shores, it tells a message. It tells a message, right? So somewhere along the line, there had to be some collision, and that was pre-planned. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks for calling. I think that might be our last call, because we are running out of time here, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank all those persons who have contributed to this program today. I have given you an outline in relation to our program that we have each year, what we do in terms to commemorate the birth and death anniversary of the founder leader of the People's National Congress Reform. In fact, the father of the nation, Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham, the Caribbean man of the 20th century. There are so many accolades that describe this outstanding Guyanese that it is only right that for the rest of our lives we continue to sing his praises and the contributions that he has made to Guyana. And today we have examined one of those pillars of his contribution, that was the local government system, and we have been able to show that the evolvement of the system in a large way is as a result of the way in which he saw the people of this country taking responsibility for their advancement and development. And I want to really thank Mr. Alexander for being here today as chairman of the foundation. I think he has clearly explained in a very detailed way this no confidence motion that was passed recently and the evolvement of the local government system in Guyana. I want to say thank you, Vincent. Maybe your last few
comments. Thank you very much. My
close.
closing word would simply be, every time something happens in this country, and we look back and we see what prevailed on the Burnham, we see the wisdom of the ideas of Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. Whether we talk local government, we see the wisdom in terms of what flaws exist now and what he had in mind. Even as we talk about this question of confidence, again we see the wisdom of what he had in mind. We would not have had this kind of fracturing based on an individual who really does not have evidence of being representing people's interests. His system didn't allow for that, and we can see that the thoughts of Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham are still relevant even today in Guyana as we try to construct a state that speaks to the question of fairness and justice and equity.
Yes, I want to thank our viewers, and I want to say goodbye until next month. Enjoy your holidays. I hope that someone will kind of consider me. I love pepper pot, so you can bring some, call me. I will come and enjoy my pepper pot until the 4th Sunday in January when I bring to you another program, The State of the Nation. I'm Clayton Hines, your host. Until January 4th Sunday, you'll see me again. Thank you.